in the Philippines. Before martial law, it was an Asian version of the United States system. The Philippines press enjoyed all the freedoms, but they failed the Filipino people.
The late Lee Kuan Yew was once a strong advocate for the Philippines, recognizing it as one of the most developed nations in the 1950s and 60s. In his memoirs, he famously stated, "There was no reason why the Philippines should not have been one of the more successful ASEAN countries."
In the 1950s, economic development in the Philippines was better than that in Korea, comparable to that in Taiwan, and was at the lower end of the same bracket as Japan.
However, after decades of observation, he would become critical of various aspects of the Philippines, including his US-style political system, pervasive corruption, and media, warning all the way back in 1992 that if they didn't put their act together, they would be surpassed economically by their neighbors.
Every Filipino knows that all the other ASEAN countries have overtaken or are about to overtake the Philippines. If the next 6 years are wasted, the Philippines will lag behind even Vietnam.
As Vietnam surpasses the Philippines in GDP per capita for the first time since the 1990s, let's first examine Singapore's initial relationship with the Philippines and Lee's insights on the country, its leaders, and its culture.
If I were a Filipino to cheer myself, I would count my blessings and start in a positive frame of mind. The Philippines is immensely better off than Afghanistan, or Lebanon, or Sri Lanka. All these three have been torn apart by strife and war. Now, unlike these countries, the Philippines can pull itself together and get on with the job. And it has a good chance of success because it is part of a region which is set for high growth.
Lee's first official visit to the Philippines took place in 1974, where he was warmly welcomed by then-President Ferdinand Marcos. Initial relations were friendly, with Lee invited to stay at the lavishly furnished Malacanang Palace, where they would play golf and talk about the future of ASEAN. 2 years later, in 1976, the two countries further solidified their partnership by agreeing to a 10% reduction in tariffs as part of a broader trade initiative, laying the groundwork for enhanced economic collaboration and a more integrated Southeast Asia. However, following the assassination of opposition leader Benigno Aquino in 1983, Marcos's administration faced immense political and financial pressure, grappling with over $25 billion in debt after foreign banks halted loans to the Philippines. Unable to meet interest repayments, Marcos's administration would ask Singapore for a loan of $300 to $500 million, to which Lee would bluntly reply, "We will never see that money back." Nevertheless, Singaporean banks would lend the Philippine government $8 billion, fully aware that repayment could take decades. In one of their last meetings, Lee would urge Marcos to hand over power to someone more capable of stabilizing the country. And to his surprise, Marcos agreed and referred to Lee as a true friend. But Marcos only let go of power a few years later after growing public discontent surrounding his autocratic rule and allegations of embezzling around $10 billion from public funds. The People Power Revolution ultimately forced him and his close associates to flee to the United States in 1986.
The democratic system malfunctioned. Fortunately, a miraculous demonstration of people's power in February 1986 saved the country from impending disaster.
However, Lee observed that many of Marcos's family and close associates would gradually return to the Philippines over the years. In his memoirs, he criticized Filipino society for welcoming them back, describing it as a soft, forgiving culture. Only in the Philippines could a leader like Ferdinand Marcos, who pillaged his country for over 20 years, still be considered for a national burial. Insignificant amounts of loot have been recovered, yet his wife and children were allowed to return and engage in politics.
Have you ever engaged in any corrupt practices?
The head is no.
Not long after, Lee met Marcos's successor, Corazon Aquino, the first female president of the Philippines and widow of the assassinated Benigno Aquino. In a notable departure from tradition, where newly elected presidents typically make their first overseas visit to Washington, Aquino chose to visit Indonesia and Singapore instead, underscoring her commitment to strengthening ties in the region. Lee had high hopes that she would lead the Philippines to success, describing her as a sincere, devout Catholic who wanted to do her best for her country. Convinced of her potential, Lee successfully convinced the US administration in 1988 to initiate a foreign aid program that resulted in over $10 billion in pledges from various countries by 1991, all aimed at helping the Philippines get back on track. However, ongoing political instability deterred donors and delayed planned projects. With more than a dozen coup attempts since the overthrow of the Marcos government, Lee observed a critical absence of cohesion within Philippine society, stating that something was missing, a gel to hold society together. He would highlight the severe inequality that characterized the nation, describing it as divided into two distinct societies: the elite mixed-race mestizos living in luxury, and the impoverished peasants, whom they cared little about. In his memoirs, Lee also expressed profound concern about the brain drain affecting the Philippines during this period, stating that something had gone seriously wrong. Millions of Filipino men and women had to leave their country for jobs abroad beneath their level of education. Filipino professionals, whom we recruited to work in Singapore, are as good as our own. Indeed, the architects, artists, and musicians are more artistic and creative than Singaporeans.
In Singapore, there are over 1,500 Filipinos, professionals, engineers, accountants, architects, managers, more than those from all other ASEAN countries. They hold their jobs on their merit. You will find that Filipinos can perform as well as Singaporeans or Thais or Malaysians or Indonesians.
After Aquino stepped down, Lee would meet Fidel Ramos in 1992, whom he described as more pragmatic and instrumental in establishing greater stability in the country than his predecessor. In the same year, Lee would reluctantly accept an invitation to speak at the Philippine Business Conference, mindful of not wanting to offend his hosts. But Filipino businessmen and public figures were eager to hear his candid insights, hoping to gain valuable perspectives on their country.
When I received your invitation to speak, I hesitated. You must have known my attitudes from reports over the years.
During his speech, Lee outlined the numerous challenges facing the Philippines and some solutions for getting its economy back on track. One challenge Lee identified was with the Philippines' adoption of the US political system.
One problem which you have is that the Philippines has an American-style constitution, one of the most difficult to operate in the world. The Americans wrote this constitution in 1787 in Philadelphia. They wanted a weak executive president, having suffered at the hands of King George III of England. They wanted the opposite of a strong monarch. But you are a developing country, and developing countries faced with disorder and underdevelopment needs strong, honest executive government. The system worked in America because of a superabundance of resources and riches in a vast, underpopulated continent. I do not believe that Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Singapore could have succeeded if they had to work under such a constitution, where political gridlock on every major issue is the way of government. And you will notice for some 28 years now, the United States system has not functioned well in the United States.
Another problem is the Philippines' adoption of US-style free speech and press, stating that it has led to much confusion and contention among the people.
The Philippines press enjoyed all the freedoms, but they failed the Filipino people. A wildly partisan press helped Filipino politicians to flood the marketplace of ideas with junk and confuse and befuddle the people so that they could not see what their vital interests were in a developing country.
However, Lee would outline a series of tasks that the Philippine government could address more effectively, starting with tackling crime and corruption.
There must be a cleanup of racketeers in the police, whether for kidnappings or other crimes. The kidnapping of a Japanese executive in the Philippines, which took 6 months to settle, was enough to abort most Japanese investment plans. Kidnappings of local Chinese have increased. 3 victims, 2 university students and 1 businessman have been killed. Other crimes, especially corruption, must be suppressed and punished. It can never be eliminated, not even in Singapore. It is possible to weed out corruption, provided top political leaders set the examples and the pace. An efficient and a strong anti-corruption unit under the President, with powers to investigate any person, however high up, and to carry it to a successful prosecution, will work wonders.
Next, Lee emphasized that the government should dismantle the policies that protect inefficient oligarchs who dominate the economy.
The second task is to free the economy from controls and monopolies. The nationalist industrialization rhetoric has benefited only a group of inefficient oligarchs, including some heading US-owned firms. The tariff barriers had been a major element of an intricate web of regulations that have shackled the Philippines, shackled its entrepreneurs, and only nurtured the favored few, cartels and monopolies, from banking to telecommunications to shipping. If you stick to your old policies because vested interests are too strong, too powerful to overturn, then Filipinos will lag further and further behind our ASEAN neighbors. Lift restrictions on trade and investment, dismantle the web of measures which keep out foreign companies and make Philippine companies compete to survive, not thrive at the expense of the ordinary Filipino.
The next task will be getting Filipinos to take politics more seriously, calling on the press to educate the masses.
If the Ramos administration can make ordinary Filipinos understand that politics is not simply elections with singing and fiestas and giveaways, but that it is about their lives, their jobs, their wages, their homes, schools for their children, hospitals, then the situation can change dramatically. The Philippines has a lively and a ambitious press. I think they should undertake this vital job of educating the Filipino voter of the link between political policies, macroeconomic reforms, low inflation, confidence, law and order with his welfare. And if they take that as their national duty, it can be done.
And finally, Lee emphasized that the Philippines must address its infrastructure challenges, particularly noting that frequent electrical blackouts significantly deter foreign investment.
Third, build up your infrastructure like power stations, roads, communications, either in partnership with or completely through the private sector. There's huge losses suffered by industrial and commercial establishments due to the electricity shortages and scheduled power blackouts, averaging 7 hours a day, with foreign investors closely monitoring the country for a stable political transition. The infrastructure problem is publicity it can ill afford.
Lee concluded that the Philippines can overcome all these challenges. There is no reason why they can't succeed.
I hope I have provoked you into setting your priorities for getting your act together so that you can achieve your potential. If you maximize the next 6 years of the Ramos administration, then you will get yourselves back into the mainstream of growth and development and be in the same league as Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. The OECD calls them now the new dynamic economies of Asia. You can be and should be one of them.
Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte is expected to land in the Netherlands in the coming hours to face charges at the International Criminal Court. Filipino police acted on a warrant through Interpol for his arrest and put him on a private plane from Manila. Police records show more than 6,000 people were killed during Duterte's controversial war on drugs. There have been some protests against his arrest. I'm going to bring in Eric Vitti. He's served as the External Relations Advisor to the former president of the ICC, and he's joining us from Brussels. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Just talk us through the process once Duterte lands in The Hague.
Yes, as soon as he gets to The Hague, the statute of the ICC mandates that within 2 to 4 days he must make an initial appearance in court, and that will be a brief appearance to confirm his identity, and then to schedule what's called a confirmation of charges hearing before a pretrial chamber of the court, and that might take 4 or 5 months before it actually happens, because in the interim, the prosecution will have to disclose evidence to the defense, and it's important to note that President Duterte will have an opportunity to mount a robust defense. And to do that, it will take time for both the prosecution and the defense to organize themselves. And then there will be a confirmation of charges hearing at which the pretrial judges will be listening to whether the prosecution can meet a standard of substantial grounds to believe that the suspect who's accused here has committed these crimes. And if they do find that evidentiary threshold is met, they will send the case to trial.
The way you're describing this in terms of the timeline, it is factoring into what we've seen before in terms of cases that are brought before the ICC, in that they are usually very protracted processes. And one would imagine that is invariably frustrating for those who believe that Duterte, in this case, has charges to answer. What is the practical timeline, do you think, that people could expect to see some sort of result one way or the other from this case?
There's so many factors that come into play. One of which is sort of the complexity of the case. From media, the charges have not been released yet, but from media reports, it seems that this may be a more straightforward case than some we've seen at the ICC. That he, in fact, is being charged with a murder as a crime against humanity for thousands of extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. And because, or if that holds up, that he doesn't face multiple more complex charges, then perhaps this case won't take as long as some others. But I think we are looking at a matter of years and not just months.
I understand that there is action being taken on behalf of Rodrigo Duterte by at least one of his lawyers to try to prevent the Philippines court from interacting or cooperating with the ICC. Given the fact that we have seen significant rulings made by the ICC with regard to Israel, for example, and its war in Gaza in recent years, how important is it, the fact that the Philippines court is interacting with the ICC?
I think at this point, it will be important for the Philippines to continue cooperating with the court in terms of allowing the ICC continued access to witnesses and evidence on the ground. There are important issues of witness protection. So one would hope that the Philippines abides by its obligations to the ICC. In 2023, the issue of the ICC's jurisdiction in this situation was already litigated at the court, and there were rulings at the pretrial level, but also by the appeals chamber upholding the ICC's jurisdiction in this situation. So the Philippines really is obligated to continue its cooperation here.
Eric Whitty, we appreciate you joining us, giving us the benefit of your experience in this. Thank you very much indeed.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.
Remember, we are talking about the custodial state here, which is the Philippines. I don't care kung yung Prosecutor General sa Amerika, sa Ghana, sa Egypt, sa Indonesia, sa Malaysia ay competent judicial authority. I don't freaking care. Even if the ICC says that the Prosecutor General is a competent judicial authority, that will be applicable if you are in the ICC already. Remember Article 59. Ibig sabihin,
Hij staat langs de film van de elke dag in het midden van de zomer van die zware fortune en zegt, ik riskeer het niet meer.
Is maar nog gelukt. Camera's zijn er niet.
Nee, maar ik heb wel regen maar ik heb
Ah, okay, so Duterte is 25 video link, it's not in court.
Ga je haar gezicht herkennen?
Ja.
Dus precies zijn gewoon een blik erop staat. En daar vanaf dat je haar ziet, je zeker ervoor zorgt. En hij zegt van, we staan daar, want hij zegt wel dat zijn collega's gaan doen, maar ik vertrouw hem niet zo. Dus hij zegt dat normaal dat het daarna niet ja, je kunt haar zo brengen. Dan kan ze daar praten. Ik ben niet helemaal fan van dat hek.
Oh, so how have things been anyway? Good? Okay.
Yeah, a bit suffering from the cold now.
Yeah, a little bit, huh?
I think last time we saw each other was for the people coming from Israel.
That's it. Yeah, the hostages.
That was true.
Yeah.
Hostages? No. The people being evacuated.
The evacuees,
Yeah.
I saw most of last year, I do both stills and video. So 23, for some reason I was on video all the time. 2024, all the time on stills. Back in video.
Yeah, okay.
They changed the system.
Okay. Where do you live in the Netherlands? Okay. You must be one of the only ones.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm technically I'm the Amsterdam stringer, and we were trying to do a dual role with stills and pictures because quite often I have to bring up photographers from Brussels, like Nicholas here today. But for some reason we decided we're going to do that with the old system, so I'm back to the
Who is the head photographer now for EFP?
Yeah, Kenzo's gone, so.
Yeah, a long time ago?
Last summer. in 12 minutes.
Ja, als je wil. Let op, hè. Je moet hem dichten, hè. Ja. Just a second.
Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Duterte est maintenant ouverte. Je souhaite la...
Good morning. I would like to welcome everyone inside and outside of the courtroom. Now, before we start with today's initial appearance, I would like to remind you that the Chamber has authorized video recordings and the taking of photographs. Please go ahead.
Je vous remercie. Vous avez une...
Thank you. You have 1 minute to take photographs and record videos.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Court officer, please, could you please call the case? Thank you, Madam President. Your Honours. The situation in the Republic of the Philippines case, the prosecutor versus Mr. Rodrigo Roa Duterte, case number ICC 0121 0125. And we are in open session.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the parties to introduce themselves, starting with the Office of the Prosecutor. Please pause before speaking and speak slowly to allow the interpreters to interpret appropriately. May I ask you to introduce yourself and to confirm whether the list of your staff that I received prior to the hearing is correct, Mr. Prosecutor?
President, Your Honours, good morning. The list is correct. Once again, Deputy Prosecutor Manjay Niang to my left, Trial Lawyer Edward Jeremy behind us, Trial Lawyer Robin Croft, International Cooperation Advisor Chantel Daniels, and our very able case manager Grace Go. I'm Karim Khan, the prosecutor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I now turn to the counsel for the defense of Mr. Duterte. As everyone can see, Mr. Duterte is present and is attending the hearing via video link. As Mr. Duterte made a long journey involving a considerable time difference, the Chamber authorized Mr. Duterte to follow the hearing at a distance. His counsel, however, is present with us in the courtroom. Thank you, counsel. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. I am Salvador C. Medjaldea, counsel for Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, counsel. I will now introduce the chamber. By my side, we have the Judge Rain Adelaide Sophie Alapine Gansu, the Vice President of the Court, and Judge Maria del Socorres Flores Liera. I am the presiding judge of the pretrial Chamber 1 of the Court, and my name is Julia Antonella Motok. Now, I would like to speak to you, Mr. Duterte. I'm speaking French, but you are receiving interpretation of what I'm saying in English. I understand that you are at ease in the English language and that the interview yesterday at the detention center was conducted in English and that you did not deem it necessary to request interpretation into any other language during this interview. This said, I would like firstly to confirm your identity. Could you provide us with your full names, please?
I'm Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
That's my first middle name is Roa. The surname is Duterte.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. What is your date of birth?
Again, ma'am.
Can we request that the question be repeated? I don't think he heard it. Thank you.
Repetition from the English booth. What is your date of birth? Yes, thank you very much, Counsel. I was asking quite simply of Mr. Duterte what his full names were, and then I subsequently asked him what his date of birth was and what his place of birth is. Is that all right, Counsel?
Yep. Of course, I do. My birth month and day is March 28, 1945. I was born in the province of Leyte in the Philippines.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. As a preliminary point. Very well. Thank you, Mr. Duterte. As a preliminary point, it is useful to clarify the nature and limited scope of this first appearance hearing. Today's hearing is neither the start of the trial, nor is it a confirmation of charges hearing. During today's hearing, no evidence will be collected or presented, and the issues of Mr. Duterte's guilt or innocence will therefore not be addressed. In accordance with Article 61 of the Rome Statute, the Court's founding treaty, and Rule 1211 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, the main purpose of this initial appearance is to answer 3 questions. Firstly, the Chamber must ensure that the person who was the subject of the arrest warrant has been informed of the crimes of which he is accused. Second, the Chamber must ensure that this person has been informed of his rights as recognized by the Rome Statute. Third, the Chamber must set a date on which it intends to hold a confirmation of charges hearing. The Chamber notes that your counsel, because as I said at an earlier stage, the aim of this hearing today is to introduce the parties and to ascertain the charges and to set a date for the confirmation of charges hearing at a later stage. With regard to the first point, I recall that Mr. Duterte has received a copy of the warrant for his arrest and that a redacted version of the prosecutor's application for the issuance of the warrant of arrest is public. I will now ask the court officer to read the charges against him. The charges will be read in English. Please, over to you, Madam Courtroom Officer. Thank you, Madam President. Your honours.
On 7 March 2025, Pre-Trial Chamber 1 concluded that there were reasonable grounds to believe that Mr. Duterte is criminally responsible pursuant to Article 25(3)(a) of the Rome Statute as an alleged indirect co-perpetrator for crime against humanity of murder pursuant to Article 7(1)(a) of the statute as follows. A. Murder of at least 19 persons, allegedly drug pushers or thieves, killed by members of the Davao Death Squad in various locations in or around Davao City, Philippines between 2011 and 2016. B. Murder of at least 24 persons, allegedly criminals, such as drug pushers or thieves or drug users, killed by or under the supervision of members of the Philippines law enforcement, sometimes with the assistance of persons who were not part of the police, at various locations in the Philippines between 2016 and 2019.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Courtroom Officer. Mr. Duterte, I'm not going to ask you to stand up because I know your condition, so I'm going to allow you to remain seated. You have just heard the reading of the charges, which are in accordance with the content of the arrest warrant you received. This means that you have been informed of the crimes of which you are accused. And this concludes the examination of the first point mentioned above. I will now turn to the second point, which forced to testify. In addition to any other disclosure provided for in the statute, the prosecutor must disclose to you, as soon as practicable, evidence in his possession or at his disposal that shows or tends to show your innocence or to mitigate your guilt, or that could undermine the credibility of the evidence against you. At the confirmation of charges hearing, you can contest the charges, challenge the evidence presented by the prosecutor, and present evidence. There will be no trial if the charges are not confirmed or if the proceedings against you are completed. You have the possibility to make an application for interim release pending trial. And finally, Mr. Duterte, you have the right to be informed as soon as possible and in detail of the nature, cause, and content of the charges in the language that you fully understand and speak. Counsel, have you understood?
We're listening, ma'am. We're listening, and before it ends, may we be allowed to present a manifestation on the circumstances behind the delivery of Mr. Duterte in this chamber.
Oui, Maître, je dois d'abord demander...
Yes, counsel. This is as part of the procedure, and as we've said since the very outset, I need to ask Mr. Duterte himself to make observations as to the condition of his surrender to the court and the conditions of his detention at the detention facility of the court since his arrival. If he can please tell us these details.
Thank you. Can I...
Oui, Maître. Oui.
The presiding judge. Yes, counsel.
please. 2 days ago, the whole world has witnessed the degrading fashion in which a former president of a sovereign country was bundled into a private aircraft and summarily transported to The Hague. To us lawyers, this would be called an extrajudicial rendition. To the less legally inclined, it was a pure and simple kidnapping. My client was denied all access to the legal recourse in the country of his citizenship, and this all in the nature of political score settling. Two troubled entities struck an unlikely alliance, an incumbent president who wished to neutralize and choke the legacy of my client and his daughter on the other hand, and a troubled legal institution subject to delegitimization and desperate for a price cuts and a legal show today on the other hand. With this in mind, it is not surprising that my client was abducted from his country. ICC private jets do not drop out of the thin air. That jet which received my client was coordinated in advance. The UAE is not a state party to the ICC and has no obligation to cooperate with the court. Yet my client sat in transit in that country for more than 5 hours. I invite the registry's representative to present today in court to explain to the judges exactly how they believe this transfer was anything other than a gross abuse of process. Given the precipitous arrival of my client, an elderly man with debilitating medical issues, hard of hearing and poor of sight, he was taken to a hospital for observation. Only this morning have I met him for the first time with less than an hour to discuss legal issues. I have not been able to present him with a hard copy of the arrest warrant because we were not supplied with such. I have not even been able to explain to him what the prosecution requested when seeking the issuance of the arrest warrant. This is because the chamber only established a redacted version of the prosecution request last night. Other than to identify himself, my client is not able to contribute anything to this hearing. Most importantly, he is not able even to tell you that he has been informed of the charges as contained in the arrest warrant for a reason more pertinent to which I alluded in my written request to this honorable pretrial chamber this morning, and which is confidential in nature. Accordingly, I repeat my respectful request, which was rejected this morning, to postpone the substantive aspect of this hearing to the next week, when I will have the opportunity to sit with my client and to explain to him what a confirmation hearing is and what the disclosure is and how the prosecution alleges that he committed crimes. I thank the court for its attention and regret to say that I do not have instructions to continue my submission any further today. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel. Now, with regard to the health issues of Mr. Duterte, I believe that the court has taken specific measures with regard to his health situation, and I note that subsequent to his arrest and when he arrived at the detention center, the court's doctor was of the opinion that you were fully mentally aware and fit, and that you have undergone further checks and tests at the detention facility. And when you broached health matters, that's saying that you were not able to come to the hearing, the doctors who consulted with you were of the opinion that Mr. Duterte was not in a position to come to the hearing physically, but that if he gave a written permission, he would be able to take part via video link. Now, that is with regard to the health matters that you just mentioned. They are very important, especially concerning the matter of age. Now, with regard to the rights of Mr. Duterte, we have before us the registrar's or the registry's report that says that Mr. Duterte has been informed of his rights, including Articles 66 and 67 of the Rome Statute, and that that he is aware of his rights and that he is also aware of the charges against him. We have before us the report of the registry saying that he was also aware of the warrant of arrest in the English language and that he is very well versed in the English language. Once again, you have the possibility of these charges being read in English, which was the case today. I have read to you in the French language the rights that he has, Mr. Duterte, before this court, and I'd like to specify once again that this is an initial hearing. In order for Mr. Duterte to be aware of his rights and the charges against him. And then there will be a full procedure that will unfurl leading up to the confirmation of charges that will enable Mr. Duterte to raise all the matters that you have just raised with regard to the warrant of arrest, with regard to the crimes committed, with regards to the charges, and any other matters associated with his arrest, and the matters of jurisdiction of the court. You have the opportunity to do this throughout these proceedings leading up to the actual confirmation of charges hearing. Now, counsel, with regard to your request for another hearing to be held next week, well, your initial request, that was, this was not accepted by the court. Now, you have seen the two decisions of the court that have been disclosed to you, and you are aware of the fact that these two decisions were refused. And this is by dint of the fact that this first initial appearance hearing does not need much preparation, as I have said to you on a number of occasions. I am now going to move on to the third stage, which is to set the date for the confirmation of charges hearing. After assessing all factors, including the need for the parties and participants to adequately prepare, as well as Mr. Duterte's rights, including his right to be tried within a reasonable time, the date for the commencement of the confirmation of charges hearing is September the 23rd, 2025. I would add that in accordance with Rule 1217 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, this date may be postponed by the Chamber depending on the progress of the proceedings, either on its own motion or at the request of the prosecutor or the defence. Before concluding this hearing, I would like to inform the parties of the next procedural steps. First, I would like to recall that in accordance with Rule 1212B of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, the Chamber holds status conferences to ensure a small exchange of information under satisfactory conditions. These conferences are organised either ex officio or at the request of the prosecutor or the defence. Secondly, a set of decisions will be taken in a timely manner to ensure that the proceedings progress smoothly and expeditiously. More specifically, I am referring in particular to a decision on the arrangements and procedure for the disclosure of evidence, and a decision setting a timetable for the disclosure of evidence in such a way as to ensure orderly and efficient disclosure between the parties. In this regard, the Chamber orders the prosecutor to begin disclosing today the information on the basis of which the warrant of arrest was issued, and to complete this disclosure no later than within the next 7 days. The Chamber will also issue a decision on the participation of the victims who, according to the statute of the court and to the extent permitted by the Chamber, are authorised to present their views and concerns at this stage of the proceedings. We have come to the end of Mr. Duterte's first appearance hearing. I would like to thank all the participants in this hearing, the interpreters and the stenographers. This concludes today's hearing.